Welcome back to Face the Nation. We continue our conversation now with Congressman Michael McCaul, the lead Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Let's pick back up on the issue of Russia. We're talking about immediate action, potentially. Congress is going away for a week. There are bills before the Senate. I know you're working on one in the House. Do you have that kind of time to play with legislation, or do you need something in terms of a tool set to hand the president more quickly?
Well, time is of the essence. I'm working on a bill I've introduced to get it. We're getting key Democrats on board, and it would be an assistance package of lethal aid to Ukraine. That's important, but what's also important is the message of deterrence. We need joint exercises in Poland, the Baltic states, Romania, Bulgaria, to show Putin that we're serious. Right now, he doesn't see we're serious, and that's why the buildup is taking place. I think this all started, Margaret, with Afghanistan and the unconditional surrender to the Taliban. When he saw weakness, weakness invites aggression. We saw that with Chamberlain and Hitler. Reagan talked about peace through strength. And right now, whether it's, and the thing is, this is not just about Ukraine. It's about China. It's about President Xi and Taiwan. It's about the Ayatollah and the bomb. It's about North Korea that just fired off 2 missiles they said were, these hypersonic weapons. I think this has broader global ramifications. We're seen as weak right now, but because of President Biden, his comments about that a limited invasion was somehow acceptable, and that NATO was divided. I think one thing he said was true is that NATO is divided, and that's Putin's goal is to divide and weaken NATO. He's accomplished some of that.
Well, as you know, this has been going on since 2014, and during the Trump administration, there was some accommodation, at least in language, from the former president on whether or not there were hard lines. So Vladimir Putin has been getting kind of a mixed message for some time here. How do you change that when President Biden, and you just heard Secretary Blinken send that message that they're willing to have reciprocal restrictions on military exercises or on placement of missiles? Is that kind of accommodation weakness to you?
Well, look, let's talk about Nord Stream 2. Biggest concession ever.
This is a potential gas pipeline from Russia to Germany.
Putin's pipeline into Europe. Congress passed bipartisan mandatory sanctions to stop that from happening. We have a presidential waiver. That's very normal. We never dreamed that a president of the United States would waive that in the national interest of the United States. How is that in the interest of the United States to allow Putin to dominate Europe's energy supply? And then at the same time shutting down Keystone and not allowing the United States to be the leader in energy, LNG, which is cleaner than Putin's dirty energy, from getting into the region. I think this president has made so many concessions with nothing in return. That's why Putin smells weakness. He's wanted this, as you and I talked about, for a long time. Yeah. It's his legacy issue. Right. And if we don't provide that deterrence, he will go in.
Well, the Germans have sort of been uncomfortable with the idea of moving on Nord Stream, and the administration is saying they're waiting on that. On the other risk here, we have midterm races coming up. In 2018, the United States took offensive action against Russia to stop them from meddling in those races. Do we need to see something like that in 2022?
I don't want to see Russia overturning Ukraine's government. I don't want to see any foreign nation adversary getting involved in our elections. But again, pointing from Afghanistan forward, we have sent a message to our adversaries that we are projecting weakness, not strength. One thing Reagan talked was peace through strength, going back to Chamberlain, Hitler. If we're projecting weakness, it only invites aggression. Historically, you know that. And this is exactly, I've talked to the administration. I want to stop this from happening, but I'm very concerned about the aggression that I'm seeing.
Okay. Congressman, thank you very much for your perspective. We'll be right back with Dr. Scott Gottlieb. We turn now to the COVID pandemic, now entering its 3rd year. Dr. Scott Gottlieb is the former FDA commissioner and sits on the board of Pfizer. Good morning to you. Dr. CDC says case numbers are coming down. You said we'd be back in person in the office in February. Do you stick by that timeline?
Yeah, I think that's timeline's still intact. You're seeing a lot of businesses make decisions to do return to work March 1st because I think they want to give themselves a cushion, especially having been surprised before. You're seeing cases come down very rapidly in the East Coast, the states that were the early outbreak states, Florida, the Mid-Atlantic, New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles. This virus is spreading to the Midwest. You're seeing cases pick up in states like Montana, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Wyoming, Idaho. So it's not done yet across the United States. There's still states that are probably in the thick of this. They have another week, maybe 2 weeks to go until they peak and start to come down. But in places like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., you're seeing cases decline very rapidly. And I think that thesis around a February return is intact.
Nearly 1 million children were infected with COVID in the last week, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. 1 million. Is it too soon for mask mandates to be lifted in schools, as the governor of Virginia just ordered?
Look, I think it is too soon to do that because a lot of schools have built their preparations around the use of masks. And whatever we want to say about the benefit that masks are providing, it's providing some benefit. And a lot of schools that couldn't implement social distancing, couldn't implement testing, are relying on masks as their only tool. So to withdraw it right at the peak of the epidemic, I think is imprudent. We should wait. I think within 2 weeks we'll be able to make that decision. But this whole COVID epidemic, I think, has been colored by the fact that policymakers have not prescribed clear endpoints to when they're going to withdraw these measures. I think parents are willing to tolerate masks in schools, recognizing it's very disruptive to children if there is an end date to it, if it's clearly prescribed when we're going to use these masks and when we're going to withdraw them so they don't disrupt 2 years of a child's socialization and school activities. So I think policymakers stepping in and saying, look, we're going to put an endpoint on this when prevalence declines to a certain level, and in sticking to it is very prudent. But to do it in a setting of the peak of this epidemic, I think puts a difficulty on schools that have based their mitigation around the use of masks.
What's that benchmark in your mind?
Well, the benchmark we prescribed last summer was around 10 cases per 100,000 people per day when we withdraw all mitigation. I think you can lean in and prescribe a higher benchmark when it comes to children in schools, because the first thing that we should do is try to withdraw these measures in the school setting. If you're going to implement masks among adults in congregate settings in a township, you want to lean in and try to withdraw it in the schools first and try to preserve as much of that environment for learning as you can.
Dr. Fauci raised a lot of hopes this week for parents of young children like me, whose kids aren't yet eligible for vaccines. He said for children under 5, you may see a vaccine available in the next month or so. You've been saying sometime between April and June. Which is it?
Well, I think a month is probably premature. Remember, the reason why this was extended was because the vaccines in the clinical trial that Pfizer did, I'm on the board of Pfizer, as you know, Pfizer tested a low dose in the children. They tested a number of different doses and chose the lowest possible dose because at a lower dose, you're going to have less reactogenicity, less vaccine-related side effects like fevers and injection site reaction. You want to make sure the vaccine is very tolerable in young kids. But probably because of that low dose, we saw less vaccine effectiveness. There were more infections in the children who were vaccinated than what we saw in a comparable group of 16 to 25-year-olds. So the decision was made by regulators working with Pfizer to extend that trial to look at a third dose to see if that third dose restored the efficacy. In the setting of Omicron, where the vaccines are providing some protection against infection, about 50%, so you're 50% less likely to get infected with Omicron if you're fully vaccinated with a booster, the primary utility of the vaccines nonetheless is the protection against severe disease, hospitalization. And in that regard, getting any vaccine into young kids probably is going to afford them a measure of protection by getting baseline immunity into them. So any reconsideration of the vaccine timeline right now by regulators is probably based on that. But I think even if the FDA were to reconsider the approval of the vaccine, you're looking at a timeline when this would get pushed at best perhaps into late March, because you'd have to re-adjudicate the data, have an AdCom, get the vaccine out into the supply chain. By the time that happens, I think you're looking at a March date, maybe late March. So I don't think this is something that's going to happen in the next month. Right now, Pfizer and the FDA are looking very closely at the data that's accrued to see if they can make a decision around this.
We'll still have to wait. You know, Doctor, because this is so highly transmissible, this Omicron variant, there are a lot of people who are coming back from infection. How vulnerable or protected are they? Because I'm getting this sense that people think they're bulletproof.
Yeah, look, what we've seen from the data is that if you get infected with any one of these variants, you probably have a period of immunity that's quite robust. We don't know how long it is, but you have a period of immunity that's quite robust, and you probably have as good, if not better, immunity against that subsequent variant as if you were just vaccinated and never infected. So people who are infected with Delta probably have a pretty robust immunity against Delta, and perhaps it's as good, if not better, than if they were just vaccinated and never infected with Delta. But what we notice is the vaccines provide the broadest possible immunity. So people with Omicron might have good protection against Omicron. They probably don't have as good protection against Delta.
Okay, which is why these mutations and these new variants are something to watch. Thank you very much, Doctor. Coming up next, a closer look at what some Americans are thinking about COVID and the economy. During the course of the pandemic, we've been listening to Americans through Zoom to get their thoughts on COVID, the economy, and how the government is handling it all. On Friday, we checked back in with 6 of them. Who feels like we are in a better place now than we were a year ago? Show of hands. No one believes we're in a better spot now.
Unfortunately, I don't think that our public servants are they're kind of on a lag with the science. I was not vaxxed, had COVID. I didn't even know I had it. I had the sniffles for 2 days and body aches. And if I hadn't lost my sense of smell, I wouldn't have known the difference. It's clearly not as horrible as perhaps it was described. For some, it has been, and I'm very sorry for that. But for a lot of us who do take care of ourselves and everything and are younger, we need to go in and live our lives. And public science has not caught up with that yet.
How many people know someone who has died from COVID or been hospitalized with COVID? So, Mildred, you raised your hand there. Do you have a different perspective when you hear the descriptions of saying it's not that bad?
I can't really say that it's not that bad. I think it is bad. I think this whole country is suffering from COVID fatigue at this point. It has become confusing and depressing. I'm an elderly person myself and a cancer survivor. And that's one of the reasons why I went ahead and took the vaccine and the booster.
You originally told us a year or so ago that you didn't want to be a guinea pig. You had concern about taking the vaccine. What changed your mind?
A lot of my friends who had gone ahead and taken the vaccine, and I saw where they had done well. And I want to be around. You know, there's never any guarantee, but I want to be around to see my grandkids.
So why don't you think, now that you have that tool in your disposal, why don't you think we're in a better place?
Well, I don't know if we are in a better place as a country. We're still very divided on this whole COVID thing.
Go ahead, Jill.
I was of the opinion that when people got vaccinated, they would let their guard down. They would go out and congregate. And I'm a football fan, and it makes my skin crawl when I watch the games and I see so many people together, because that's exactly what it did. They got vaccinated. They thought, we're fine. We can go out and do all the things we normally do. And that's the dangerous part. Now, I'm unvaccinated, but I wouldn't dream of not wearing a mask. The things that I see going on in America, it makes my skin crawl because people think we're out of the woods and we're not.
So when you hear President Biden say this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, Jill, do you feel like he's talking about you?
Not at all. Not at all, because I work with someone who's vaccinated and has had the booster, and they've had COVID 3 times. So I'm not buying that.
Jorge, you are nodding your head in full agreement with Jill.
Oh, 100%. I think that's part of the problem that we've had is the misinformation. Actually, studies have already shown that cloth masks are not effective at all.
That's right. The quality of your mask. The quality of your mask matters a lot.
The quality of the mask. And they didn't say that at first. They said, oh, just wear a mask and you'll be fine. So I think when your leader is saying one thing and then it's not true, you begin to question that. People that don't want to get vaccinated have their own reasons, and I don't think it has anything to do with President Trump.
And to your point, former President Trump has gotten vaccinated and boosted, he says. So he has now endorsed it. But Chelsea, jump in here. How are you feeling? Are you feeling more confident these days?
No, not really. I'm still worried about getting sick. I'm fully vaxxed. I got my booster. I wear my mask. But I agree, like the messaging has been really confusing. And I don't blame people at all who haven't gotten vaccinated, because the story was the pandemic will be over. But the truth of the matter is people do still get sick even though they're vaccinated. So I think that things are just as bad as they were when the pandemic started.
And Jorge, walking into the classroom, you were concerned as a teacher about getting exposed. I mean, do you feel like the safety guidelines for classrooms are clearly communicated?
In Texas, we are. We don't wear masks. You don't have to get a vaccine. You get a vaccine if you want. It's you take care of yourself. And that's how it should be. You have got to have your own personal convictions and you follow them. If you choose not to get vaccinated, then you're choosing to live with those consequences.
The things that I've done thus far, it's protected me and I've not gotten sick. And if I do, that's something I have to live with. But just right now, I just feel like I have a choice, and my choice is just to not do it.
We are a year into unified Democratic control of the House, of the Senate, of the executive branch. Do you feel any differently? Do you feel that Washington understands what all of you are experiencing out there? Beth is shaking her head no. I mean, so many of you are. But have you always felt that way? Or is there a new level of sort of skepticism about Washington?
Yeah, I think so. I really had such high hopes for this administration when they came in. And it's just been one disaster after another. Afghanistan, inflation, take your pick. I just don't understand. I thought this was going to be a president for the people, of the people. And I just feel like it's one, hurdle after another that we all have to climb.
Chelsea, I saw you raise your hand.
I do agree that fundamentally for me, nothing has changed. I think that I am more skeptical now. My life has not improved. COVID has not improved. Biden has not, stuck to any of his promises. I don't think anyone in Washington is really for working people. And that has been so clear this year.
That point on working people, there has been at least $2 trillion pumped into the economy. There have been childcare tax credits. When President Biden took office, he sent out those $1,400 checks. There's been all this money pumped in with the intention of helping working people. Are you saying it just hasn't made a difference in your life?
Certainly not in my life personally.
Sandy, do you feel that way? I mean, I'm looking at a $300 tax credit per month for each child, the $1,400 checks that President Biden handed out. I'm looking at all these lists of things that were pumped out there with the intention of helping everyday people. Do you agree with Chelsea that it just hasn't made a difference in your life?
It really hasn't made a difference at all, at least in my life. Sure, it may have helped some people temporarily, but ultimately, what everything's caused with all this money pumped into the economy, it's caused inflation.
Well, economists would tell you a lot of that has to do with just the shocks from the pandemic. If you got a shot, if you went out and got the vaccine because it would help the economy, is that an effective selling point for you versus telling you you're going to get sick or not?
That doesn't help the price of bacon right now.
Can I see a show of hands? Do any of you feel like the economy has gotten better in the past year? All of you are saying no, even though the jobs picture is brighter, even though the direction of the economy and recovery is happening. Are you all concerned about rising prices and inflation?
I go to the grocery store now, I'm paying double the amount that I was paying, even a few months ago. Everything's gone up. My granddaughter loves bacon, by the way, and I can barely afford bacon.
And whose fault do you think that is? I mean, it's the Federal Reserve that controls interest rates. It's their job to control inflation. Do you blame the president? Do you blame the central bankers? Or do you blame just Congress?
I know the Federal Reserve is talking about increasing the interest rate, but I think it's a combination. Congress is worthless. You don't even want me to start on Congress.
I actually do, because this is one of the things in President Biden's first year. One of the things they say they are most proud of is this historic investment in infrastructure and the fact they got Republicans and Democrats to sign on to it. Even with that, you still say they're worthless.
I do, because there's so much more that needs to be done.
Like what? What do you need?
I need for the price of bacon to go down. How about that? I need for the government to stop spending so much money on things that are worthless.
Like what?
That are not going to benefit the people. I mean, they're sending out N95 masks, to cover people's faces. Somebody's making it, and somebody's making money off of that. That to me, that's crazy. They're also sending out COVID tests for people to do COVID testing at home. Waste of money.
The administration would say these are the things that will help keep the economy going, because then you won't have to stay home if you don't catch COVID.
It takes 12 days to get the test in the mail, another 12 days to get your results. That's 24 days.
Well, these at-home tests are supposed to be quick, just a few minutes.
Here's what's wrong with our administration. They, like she was saying, here you are sending all these tests, sending the masks. So I'm going to put more money into this economy. I'm going to keep spending more money, and it's going to fix everything. No, inflation is going to hit 8-9%. We're going to be back to Jimmy Carter, and we know what happened to Jimmy Carter. You can't keep doing that. I almost feel like the administration came in and said, you know what, we're going to do everything opposite of what Trump did.
There will be more of our Listening to America segment Monday on our CBS News streaming network during Red and Blue. And the full conversation will be on our website at facethenation.com. That's it for us today. Thank you all for watching. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.